Born a slave, he spent his days polishing mana stones for people far above his status. In a world where only nobles can become grimoire mages, someone like him never stood a chance. Everything changes the moment he touches a mysterious grimoire and awakens eyes that can see magic itself. Now, the mythical beasts that rule this world have begun to acknowledge him. Can the boy who was treated as worthless uncover the 7 legendary beasts and rewrite his destiny? In the center of the world tree, home to many races, stretches a vast continent called Huguenot. Fierce offensive and defensive battles between the demon army of the far west and the human kingdom of the central continent have intensified significantly over the past few years. With the demons remaining unscathed after the attack, humans were forced to wage a desperate struggle. But there were also those who lit a glimmer of hope on the battlefield of despair. There were humans who freely wielded lost ancient magic to achieve crushing victories over the demon armies. They were summoned to the battlefield, and they were called Grimoire Masters. Right now, the fortress was under attack by monsters, and the cannons sprang into action. At the commander's command, a shot rang out, and a deafening roar reverberated throughout the area. Archers unleashed fiery arrows at the monsters attempting to scale the wall, but they were unfazed. The soldiers were panicking. Nothing could stop these monsters, and there were tons of them. They climbed the walls, and the soldiers fled in terror when the Grimoire Master, Alan, appeared. He cast a reflection spell, and the monsters were immediately thrown off the wall by magic. He told the soldiers with a smile to rest. They were now safe. 2 of his comrades came with him. The battle-hardened Laz apologized to the soldiers for the delay, and El noted with a grin that the men were holding their position quite well. The soldiers' spirits immediately lifted, and Alan told El and Laz to act. While he was preparing the spell, they approached him. El took out his magic bow, took aim, and fired. The arrow flew at the enemy, and the magical bonds emanating from it also trapped the monsters nearby. Alan took out the stones, arranged them on the grimoire, and a glow began to emanate from them. A huge magic circle spread out beneath the monsters' feet. He clenched his fist, and a storm descended upon them. Streams of air grabbed the monsters, tossing them into the air, and a strong wind arose. At this point, Laz, holding his sword in front of him as a shield, noticed that their commander was about to cast a new spell. This time, he used magical stones of 2 colors, purple and yellow. They mixed together, creating a bright sphere, and then a thin beam shot into the sky and created a huge magic circle. As soon as he waved his hand, the Rain de Caravno spell was cast, and thousands of lightning bolts rained down on the monsters from the magic circle. El, with a nervous smile, noted that this was simply terrifying, and that was why Laz had erected the shield. The Grimoire Master closed the book, jumped off the wall railing, and told the soldiers that they were finished. The soldiers were shocked. At first, they didn't believe it. After all, they themselves couldn't leave a scratch on them. So how did they defeat these demons? And with just 1 blow at that. The soldier glanced at the squad. The Grimoire Master removed his hood, and the puzzle in his head came together. This hair color and the shape of the light, visible for a split second, is the one rumored, the White Wolf Grimoire Master. A squad rode up to the city walls. The soldier loudly called out to those on the wall and asked, "Are they all safe there?" El said, "This must be the support army of the human kingdom. They'll leave the rest to them." The soldier was so happy at their arrival, almost to the point of tears, and Alan thrust a sign in his face, asking if they could pass through. The soldier asked, "Is this a travel permit?" Alan glanced at the fading flame of his magic, and answered that they were going to the Dragon Kingdom. His magic swirled, gathered into a ball, and then flared up like fireworks, and he looked up at the morning sun. El leaned back warily against the railing and asked if it really existed. A magical stone that held all the ancient magical properties of this world. He didn't think they'd find anything like it. Laz suggested he return alone and told Master Alan that he would follow him, no matter what hell lay ahead. El indignantly called him too serious, sighed heavily, gathering his strength, and seeing that they were both already leaving, excitedly ran after them, asking them not to leave him behind. He threw a smiling arm over the irritated Laz's shoulder, and Alan glanced at them with a smile, lost in thought. And then he called out to them and suggested they move on. Everything in the world, or the beginning of the world, at least that's what they say. It's time for them to go in search of the primordial mana stone. But that moment is still far away. Let's return to the past. Among the precious stones mined on this continent, there are those that, in very rare cases, contain lost ancient magic. These rare stones are known as mana stones. Beneath the feet of the venerable nobility, imprisoned slaves polish raw ore daily. The bell rang loudly. MC looked at the stone he had polished and thought, "Is that all for today?" The overseer behind him grabbed a slave by the head and, showing him the stone, exclaimed, "What the hell is this?" He nervously apologized to him, and he exclaimed, "This is not polished enough. None of these stones he is working on are polished. Does he think he can make money off this trash?" Another warden looked at the stone that Alan had polished and said with a grin, "They are all useless. If they are going to polish them, then they should do it like him." He wanted to take the stone, but MC did not let him and asked him to wait. He was still in the process. Another overseer immediately kicked him in the side. causing him to fall to the floor and hit his nose. The man said that he was really annoying, especially those eyes of his. Does he think he can behave like this just because he's good at polishing stones? His friend slapped him in the face and said that an insolent boy like him needed to be taught a lesson. He grabbed him by the hair and pulled his head up, saying, "If he wants to polish stones so badly, then let him do the same for everyone else." He brought his fist to his face, and then they both started hitting him in turns. When he fell, they finally decided to let him go and ordered the rest of the slaves to go to their bunks. When they were about to leave, Alan stood up and grabbed them both by the shoulders and said, "3 strokes left. They should hit him about 3 more times before they go. They will let him polish stones for every stroke he takes, right?" The overseer immediately slapped him in the face, ordering him not to touch it, and MC reached out to them again, asking them to hit him again. The man became nervous, thinking he was going crazy while they were beating him. An old man named Klaus was watching all of this. Time passed, and having finished his work, Alan returned to his cell. He glanced at the light coming through the window and wondered if it was morning already. He had gotten too carried away. Red, yellow, blue, these were the stones he was polishing today. He had never seen such a light blue before. It had more energy inside than the other stones. It was wonderful. He wanted to see more types of stones. He hoped they would let him polish this much every day. He had just closed his eyes when suddenly there was a crash. The warden kicked the bars and announced the start of work. The old man extended his hand to Alan to help him up, and then the two of them went to work. Since he had been here, no one had ever tried to talk to him, until now. That day, the old man had not left his side, and when he sat down at the table with him, he asked if he needed anything. The old man confirmed this, and the overseer, handing out the stones, told the frightened slave to be sure to polish them well, and then turned to Alan and warned him. If he caught him napping, he would immediately shoot him. He didn't answer him and got to work. He scraped off the top layer and thought, "Is this purple? Rather, there is an admixture of dark red. This is another color he has never seen. He wonders what it will look like after polishing." The mere thought of this brought a sparkle to his eyes and a smile, but the old man distracted him, asking why he did that. He irritably said that he was trying to concentrate, hoping that he would leave him alone. But the old man insisted he could find a moment for conversation. What was he thinking about yesterday? MC glanced at the overseer and answered him that he just wanted to polish the stones. That's all. He had never seen anything so beautiful in the alleys. At the time when he was an orphan, he desperately fought for survival every day. His soul had nothing to fill. He was no different from the walking dead. Here you are treated like a slave. This is hell. But as long as he is here, he can continue polishing these mysterious and beautiful stones. The old man asked, did he let them beat him just for this? And he even sacrificed his sleep, right? Alan continued polishing and said that he was too noisy. It was none of his business what he liked. He just liked these beautiful stones. The old man asked in confusion, "Are these pebbles beautiful?" The boy with a sparkle in his eyes answered him that they are beautiful. The more he polishes them, the brighter they shine, and a pattern appears inside. Hearing about the pattern, the old man was surprised, and MC continued, "When he sees them shimmer, his heart calms." The old man asked, "Does he see it?" He noticed that he was surprised and asked why he was reacting like that. Couldn't he see it? The old man stroked his beard in confusion and grinned faintly, thinking, maybe this boy will amount to something. He told him what he was looking at was ancient magic. Of course, he didn't believe him at first. These stones that they polished every day were mana stones. That's what they call special gems that store ancient magic. Simply put, this stone contains incredible magic. If you use it in combination with a grimoire, you can use the magic inside it. The stones they polish here are mostly just cheap scraps. Alan asked if this meant that there were such beautiful stones outside. He confirmed it and told him that in this world there are stones for wind, fire, and water. Many mana stones store all possible magic, much more than those that are forced to be polished here. The mere thought that there were all kinds of stones in the world, much more than here, delighted him, and he asked the old man to tell him more about it. Where did he need to go? Where could he find them? The old man laughed quietly and answered him that first he needed to get out of here. But then someone hit him, and he fell to the floor. MC immediately ran up to him worriedly, and the man who hit him said, he hasn't been here for a long time, so he's thinking about escaping from here. Alan looked up at him and saw in his hands the very grimoire the old man was talking about. The man asked where they were going. He measured the old man with a displeased look and said, what impudence to think that he still had the strength to think about escaping. The old man called him by the name Malek and asked in a rage how he had the nerve to show his face to him. The man smirked and MC asked, does he know him? Klaus confirmed it. This man has lost his way. He is a traitor. Malek said with a smirk that it was rude. And this, after they got along so well as colleagues and combat magicians for 30 years? Klaus clenched his fist and said, they really did get along. He was hardworking and exceptional. He always relied on him, at least until that incident 2 weeks ago. Not only did he use a child to steal his book, but he also secretly sold mana stones to line his pockets. As the leader of the Grimoire Masters, he cannot forgive him. Malik smirked and called him a hypocrite. It was because of his soft-hearted approach that he allowed his incompetent grandson to be taken hostage and ended up in this situation. Isn't that so? An unparalleled genius, fluent in more than 10 types of ancient magic, a master of miracles. Even someone like him is nothing without that book. He is no different from an ordinary old man. Klaus angrily ordered him not to touch his book with his filthy hands, and he asked with a smirk, his book? He thought that if he used his supreme grimoire and the gemstone, he could also wield incredible magic. But no matter how many times he tried, he couldn't activate ancient magic at his level. So to him, it was completely useless junk. He threw the book and the mana stones on the floor, and their glow immediately caught Alan's eye. This book and this beautiful stone, they look so beautiful and sparkle. Just looking at them makes him uneasy, as if they were calling to him. Malik said, if his powers don't manifest with this, then it's probably his eyes. Why don't you tell him already? How can he see the stone's power? Klaus lunged at him in a rage, and the warden grabbed him and punched him in the stomach. MC wanted to run to his aid, but the second warden grabbed him. The old man was quickly tied up, and he asked his former comrade, even if he told him, he wouldn't be able to see it with those clouded eyes, tainted with greed. Malik hissed a curse through his teeth, grabbed him by the hair and exclaimed, does he even realize what situation he's in? He is a nobody. Nothing but arrogance and hypocrisy. No better than puny trash now. He's going to use him as a test subject to gain this power until he dies. His eyes and his power, he'll definitely make it his own, no matter the cost. He picked up a candle from the table and threw it on the floor, causing it to immediately burst into flames, and Klaus exclaimed with alarm in his voice, what is he going to do? Malik held the grimoire and the magic stones to the fire and said, if these tools are not connected to his power, then they will no longer be of any use to him. He guarantees that he will never again think of escaping. Klaus asked him to stop, but it was too late. He threw the grimoire and stones into the fire. Alan glanced at the shining purple stone and, without thinking, rushed into the fire and grabbed it, despite the scorching heat. He quickly gathered all the mana stones, and since he was already in the fire anyway, the old man asked him to take the book as well. He saw the glimmer of the grimoire in the fire. Malik ordered him not to do so, and grabbing a burning stick, lunged at him. But he simply grabbed it with his hand, which shocked the man. The boy glared at him, ordering him not to interfere, and climbed into the fire again. He gritted his teeth in pain, applied a little more effort, and finally touched the grimoire. He was glad he was able to get it, and at his touch, the book glowed brightly, and the fire flared even brighter. The old man was surprised, because magic responded to him, and MC looked at the bright sparks before his eyes and thought, what is this? He feels a deep burning inside himself. Everything he sees sparkles. He feels that now he can do anything. Malik indignantly called this absurd. The slave awakened as a grimoire master. He ordered the overseer to drag him here immediately, took out his book, and thought, right now he must make sure that this grimoire definitely does not fall into the hands of Klaus. He used the water stone, telling the slave to know his place, and when magic appeared around him, he directed a stream of water at him. 2 water balls rushed towards the boy with incredible speed. He was frightened, and then the man's face was scalded by steam. The water quickly boiled and dissipated. Alan did it intuitively. He now understood that he could control this flame. He waved his hand, erecting a wall of fire in front of him, and the man wondered, what's wrong with him? He just awakened and already controls magic. He fired a water ball at him, but he was able to defend himself, and Klaus thought, he has that special eye that sees these letters, and his high compatibility with ancient magic suggests that this boy could be a pleasant genius. However, no matter how talented he is still a complete beginner, lacking sufficient knowledge. He's completely out of step with Malik. He called out to the boy and extended his hand toward him. MC realized that he needed to give this grimoire to the old man and immediately ran toward him. Seeing this, Malik created a huge water ball to hinder him, then waved his hand and threw it at him. As long as the grimoire was in his hands, he could defend himself. But when he handed it to the old man, the water covered him and threw him aside. But during the fall, he managed to throw the magic stones to the old man, and he deftly caught each of them. After that, there was a huge splash. Alan was thrown back and hit his back against the wall. Now, it was the old man's time. Finally, returning his grimoire, he told his former comrade that his reign would end here. He was nervous, but he had a plan prepared for such a case, and he asked with a smirk, did he think he would lose to him? He took them with him. The warden brought crippled children here in chains, and Klaus asked, are these kidnapped children? What is he even going to do? MC immediately noticed the black things on their shoulders. Is that also a mana stone? Malik answered the old man that he created them to defeat him. It is a special treasure. He ripped the mana stone from the child's shoulder, causing him to immediately fall unconscious, and the warden cried out in fear. Afterward, He did the same to the other children, shocking everyone at the sight. Klaus furiously called him a scoundrel and asked if he even resorted to human experiments. Alan was horrified at the thought, and Malik said he sought only absolute power as a mage. These brats were doomed to live and die like trash. The boy's face darkened, and the man placed his foot on the child's head, saying that this was beneficial to his magnificent research and should be protected. Klaus furiously shouted his name, after which Malik unleashed this dark blood magic toward the old man's scorching fire. Seeing the magic of the Grimoire Masters, MC was greatly delighted, while the old man slowly suffered defeat. This dark power forced him to bow down and kneel, which Malik enjoyed. He said with a smile, "This day has finally come, the day when he will crush him and force him to his knees like this. How long has he dreamed of this? Why doesn't he just surrender along with that insolent awakened one? He will not leave a drop of blood or a piece of flesh from them. He will use them both as a test with great pleasure." Alan knew the old man would lose in this scenario, and something sparkled next to him. He picked up the polished stone from the floor and thought, what if he could do it again? He tried hard to remember that feeling, those sparkling patterns. He refused to spend the rest of his life as a slave here. He was going to see all the stones in this world from the outside. His desperate desire awakened the mana stone. Streams of magic erupted from it, and the two Grimoire Masters looked at him in surprise. Then he cast a furious glance at Malik and said, "This place and him, absolutely everything, he will burn to the ground." Malik was shocked. How could he unleash ancient magic without a grimoire? He shuddered when the boy said he would burn everything here to the ground, and Klaus, meanwhile, wondered if he had set the mana stone to madness. Malik changed the stone, threw a thick fog at it, and shouted that he was just a slave. MC walked towards him, easily repelling his attack. He then cursed and directed streams of fog at him again, but despite this, Alan continued to move forward. The guards unconsciously backed away, and Malik exclaimed, "What are they doing? Let them not just stand there, but at least do something." They were very scared, but they still began to act, and MC glanced at the guards running towards him and thought, if they surround them, it will be very unpleasant. He just wants to get the rest of the slaves out of here as soon as possible. He used magic again and asked the old man to take care of the people behind them. He immediately turned to them, and the boy ran to the attack. The two magics collided, scattering everything around. Black fire spread to the furniture, which flew under the influence of magic, and then it fell on the guards, engulfing them in flames as well. Malik was now alone, casting a nervous glance at the boy, while Klaus led the slaves to safety. The two clashed again, Alan parrying every attack from Malik and then attacking him with a stream of black flame. He raised his shield and thought, someone like him could lose to a mere petty slave? It was simply impossible. His shield cracked, then shattered with a crash under the onslaught of magic, and his arm was thrown back. Then black flames engulfed his magic stones and burned them to ashes. A powerful stream of fire struck him, throwing him back. MC approached him, and he exclaimed in rage, how dare he ruin his plans? He had one more mana stone left. He placed it in the grimoire and created a magic circle under the boy's feet. And then dark magic encased him in a sphere. He smiled, already thinking he had succeeded, but the sphere shattered, and Alan grabbed him by the collar and pulled him towards him, telling him not to stand in his way. He released a flame. It quickly engulfed Malik, and when he finally lost his strength, he let him go. Klaus looked at the boy and thought, he knew he had potential, but to think that an awakened child had fought a grimoire master of Malik's caliber, and even won. MC returned to him and asked, this man is a criminal, right? Can they make him pay for his crimes? Klaus sighed with a smile, then placed the windstone on the grimoire and, lifting the traitor into the air, said that they would make him suffer. The mana stone in Alan's hand calmed down. He immediately lost his strength and almost fell, but Klaus caught his arm and told him to hold on. They were leaving here right now. They climbed up to the huge doors leading to the outside world. MC's eyes were immediately blinded by the bright sun. At first, he couldn't even believe they were free. He joyfully turned to the old man and spread his arms wide, exclaiming that they had done it. Let him tell him where the place with the stones he mentioned was. If they went far, he would need to prepare. An overseer and guards were standing outside, and seeing the boy, he pointed him out to the guards and exclaimed, it was he, this very slave, who set fire to the mansion. After this, Alan was taken to trial, where the nobility and even the king himself had gathered. The judge declared, early in the morning, this man was charged with arson on the estate of the magician, Lord Malik Lamberic. This defendant is a slave, so there is no need to ask questions. They sentence him to death. Everyone supported the judge's decision, began to call the boy a dirty slave, and wish him death. And when MC was about to say at least a word in his defense, Klaus entered the courtroom and announced his desire to file an objection. Hearing his voice, Alan turned around excitedly, and the nobles began to whisper, isn't this the master of miracles, Lord Klaus? Why should a man of such a position be here? Klaus rose to the place of the accused and said, making judgments without striving for the truth, just because he is a slave, is a little premature. He turned to his majesty and asked what he would say to this. He said with a smile that they had not seen each other for a long time. He is sure that since the defendant is a slave, This is a just punishment. Why should a man like him defend this child? He answered him. The fact is that this child is his student. Alan and the king were surprised. He excitedly rose from the throne and exclaimed, "Does he mean to say that the slave has really awakened?" Klaus gave Alan the grimoire and the magic stone. He was a little nervous, but seeing the old man's determined grin, he smiled himself. He understood his intentions. To make these people listen to him, he simply had to show them his worth, not as a slave. He would show them who the real villain was. His hands were released, and the king stroked his beard with interest, saying, "If this child really is a grimoire master, then they should listen to him." He didn't doubt his words, but he had never heard of a slave becoming a grimoire master. The nobility agreed with him. Grimoire masters are extremely rare anyway. Only a few awaken per year, if at all. It was practically impossible for such a vile slave to awaken, but MC proved them otherwise. He placed the magic stone on the grimoire, and streams of water swirled around it. Everyone present was shocked. The slave really did awaken, and Alan was enjoying the water magic at that time. Then one of the nobles jumped up from his seat and exclaimed, "There must be a mistake. Do they even realize how many nobles dream of becoming grimoire masters? Such an insignificant slave cannot become one." MC got tired of this yapping. He directed streams of water at the man and called him too annoying. A huge wave almost washed over him, but stopped very close to him, and Alan said, "He and that guy always talk about bloodlines. They look down on everyone. Are they, the nobles and grimoire masters, really that good? Is he so good that he gets away with murder?" His voice became firmer. He ordered him to answer this question, and the nobleman nervously exclaimed, "Of course it is not so. The law never allows murder." MC grinned, calming the water magic and saying, "In that case, there's someone here who deserves a much greater punishment than him." The nobleman fell back into his seat in fear, and Alan exclaimed, "The man who tried to kill the old man and him, Malik, who sacrifices children's lives for human experiments. Shouldn't he stand trial?" The king turned to Klaus with a surprised look, and he, placing a hand on the boy's shoulders, told him that it was true. If it weren't for him, he doubted he'd be standing here safe and sound now. MC added, "If they need proof, let them search the basement of his mansion. He made it out of stone, so there should be unburned traces left there. The children Malik brought, the children from the basement, they could serve as proof of his human experiments. Even after all that's said, if this country is going to kill him just because he's a slave, then he'll fight with all his might and leave this place." He released his magic, confirming his intentions, and Klaus said to his majesty, "He is not bluffing. He really does not mind letting the precious grimoire master leave the country." The king looked at their determined faces. Of course, he could not let him go, and therefore declared the meeting over. He orders the knights to investigate the property of Lord Malik Lumberic. After that, everyone dispersed, but before Klaus left the courtroom, the king called out to him and asked, "Does he understand everything?" He should keep an eye on his student. He bowed in response, saying that he understood everything, and then they left. Once outside, Alan stretched and thanked the old man for his help. Finally, he was free. In this outfit, he looks completely different. They called him the strongest or something. Is he really that strong? Klaus sighed heavily and told him to call him master, not old man. And he is not a magician, but a grimoire master. MC understood everything and said with a smile, "The most important thing is that he's finally free. Let him quickly tell him where the magic stones are. What will he need for the journey? He won't ask for such luxuries as a carriage, but he will definitely need a riding horse. And there's food to be found in the forest, right?" The old man was very tired from this onslaught of questions. He asked him to calm down and said with a heavy sigh, "He's so impatient. He told them he was his disciple, didn't he? Now he will learn the basics of the grimoire master profession from the very beginning." Alan wasn't very impressed with this future. He doesn't want to become a grimoire master, he just wants to go in search of magic stones. Klaus said that he understands his desire, but he should listen to him carefully. This continent is now very dangerous because of the demons in the West that are attacking other countries. For a child like him, who has no way to protect himself, traveling alone is pure madness. He would die before he even left human territory. MC resolutely clenched his fists and declared, "Even so, he wants to go and find these stones." He was the one who told him about them. Such a world exists, doesn't it? The old man sighed heavily, lightly hit him on the top of the head with the book and said, "That's why he must become a grimoire master. If he wants to find the stones, he first needs to acquire knowledge, the characteristics of these stones, the classification, the magic inside. His worldview will completely change depending on how well he understands magic. If he studies at the magic tower and becomes a grimoire master, he will gain authority, power, and knowledge. He will receive in abundance what he currently lacks in his search. Let him use the advantages of the magic tower to his advantage, so he can live the way he wants to live in this world." This thought made his heart flutter. He wanted to see all the shining stones in the world. That was how he wanted to live. So he agreed. If the master said so, then he would go to this magic tower. But the moment he thought it was a waste of time, he would immediately leave on his journey. Klaus smiled and called this very fair, then pointed to the building behind him and said, "Welcome to the magic tower." And soon his first day at the magic tower arrived. Klaus led him around the grounds and said he'd already touched on this topic yesterday. The magic tower serves as the nation's main defense against demonic invasions. and it's also a research center specializing in ancient magic and the manipulation of mana stones. Local grimoire masters carry out state-assigned tasks or immerse themselves in their own research. They're free to spend their time in whatever activities suit their individual skill levels. The core of all these operations is here, on the top floor, known as the Great Hall. Just climb the stairs and he'll find it. He's already coordinated everything with the staff, so he can confidently complete his registration. Before going up, Alan hesitantly called out to him and asked, "What about him?" He replied that he had business to attend to, so he couldn't accompany him further. He'd better try his best there. After that, MC began to climb. The stairs were very long, and he was already starting to get tired. Fortunately, by this point, he'd almost reached the top. He heard voices above and wondered if it was here. He climbed up and was amazed by what he saw. A huge book in the hall, with students hovering next to it, writing something on the page. Alan became curious about what they were doing, and approached them closer, when the girl at the reception desk called out to him, and he shuddered in fear. She smiled and asked, "His name is Alan, right?" The Lord of the Magic Tower told her to wait for him. She helped him register at the tower, after which he was given an ID card, which immediately caught his attention because it had a mana stone embedded in it. The girl said that since he was a student, this ID card was made of a mana stone, which has water-like properties. He could increase his rank, accumulating achievements for completing tasks and conducting research. And the higher his rank, the greater his salary and authority would be. He asked if there were any tasks he could do right now, and she pointed to a huge book, telling him that tasks could be found in the memoriam he'd seen earlier. Commonly called the memoriam, it contained all the mission and research logs since the founding of the Magic Tower. The memoriam also stored the personal records of each grimoire master. She asked him to place his hand on the book, and as soon as he did, a message appeared on the page. User, Alan. Authentication successful. Classification, apprentice. He needed to specify what he was doing. The girl told him that he could also control this with voice commands. He should try asking the memoriam to show him available tasks. He spoke the command briefly, causing the girl to laugh and say that he didn't need to say each word separately. After the command, the memoriam began searching for a mission and displayed the available ones on the page. The girl continued to explain everything to him. As a rule, apprentices must be paired with a grimoire master of standard rank or higher to complete a mission. But he already has his first mission. The Master of the Magic Tower assigned him a task. It was Alan who wanted to take the mission to explore the ore veins instead, and the girl excitedly asked him to wait. This is a mission that people take on right before completing their apprenticeship. It is about fighting demons, so for him it is too early. But he did not listen to her. When she heard from the memoriam that the mission was accepted, she grabbed her head and exclaimed, even with the esteemed Master Lucas acting as his leader, it is too dangerous. He told her that if it comes to a fight, he will be fine. Besides, if this mission is on the list, then he is allowed to take it, right? And more importantly, who is Lucas? She was surprised and asked, has he not met him yet? He is the only apprentice of the Master of the Magic Tower, known as the Maestro of Miracles. Usually, it takes 10 years to promote to a mid-level position, but he is an outstanding master who achieved it in 4 years. A passing girl overheard their conversation and ran up to them, exclaiming that he was a true genius. MC was startled by her sudden appearance, and she said, "The Master of the Magic Tower hasn't taken on an apprentice for decades, and yet he took Master Lucas. Rumor has it that only he is capable of inheriting the research of the Master of the Magic Tower. Isn't he amazing?" The girl added that having the world-respected Master Lucas as a senior master was the greatest honor. While they were chatting animatedly among themselves, MC noticed the other tower members staring at him and whispering that he was a slave. He ignored them and went to meet this senior master. A mission with a two-man team seemed too troublesome to him, but there was nothing to be done. He would just have to put up with it until his rank increased. He entered the room where he was supposed to be and immediately heard a displeased voice. Lucas was running around the room with a broom and shouting, "Only 3 days have passed. But why is everything so terrible? Just because he wasn't here. Why can't anyone put things back where they belong?" He quickly put everything back in place, saw that important documents were lying on the floor and started to collect them, then looked up and saw a boy in front of him. Alan, confused, asked who he was, and the boy stood up and asked. So it was Alan. He was glad to meet him. His name was Lucas Valen. He was his senior colleague. MC frowned and thought, so that's what he was like? He scared him. The boy asked, he just came from the Great Hall, right? Has he already been briefed about their mission? He's probably nervous, because this is his first mission, but he will be with him, so he can relax. If there's anything he doesn't understand, he should just ask. Alan handed him the mission sheet and thanked him. He's not nervous, so everything is fine. Anyway, he decided to take another mission. Let him see for himself. Lucas immediately checked the paper and asked, dumbfounded, "Is this the mine in the southern forest?" It wasn't the right place to go for the first quest, but there was an official seal. MC took a few books from the shelves and asked when they were leaving. Lucas was still confused and told him that if they took the morning carriage to the southern forest, they would be there in about 2 hours. He wanted to say something else, but Alan interrupted him and headed for the stairs, saying, They will set off tomorrow morning. Lucas looked after him in surprise, dropped all the documents from his hands, and immediately began to collect them. While MC was climbing to the second floor, he glanced at him and thought, he seems like a nice enough guy, but since he was going on a journey anyway, there was no need to be friendly. He should take all the books he found useful while he had the chance and read them all. As soon as he opened the book, he remembered the mission document and the reward, the right to participate in the grimoire selection ceremony. He had to read all the books so that he could set off on this journey at least one day early. He didn't even notice how he fell asleep and slept until evening. Opening his eyes, he immediately saw a light from the lower floor, and Lucas, who had just sat down to study the mana stones, when he saw this beautiful glow, his eyes immediately lit up. He went down to the first floor. Lucas apologized to him and asked if he had woken him up. He answered with a smile that this was not the case at all, and picked up one of the stones and examined it in the light. The guy asked, so he sees it too? In the magic tower, only a few can see the ancient magic contained within the jewels. The master, and they, his students. Alan didn't listen to him at all. All his thoughts were occupied only by the beauty of this stone. He noticed that the gold frame framing the stone was different from the others. He compared two stones, white and blue, and Lucas said that the border design differs depending on the attributes and derivatives of the jewels. MC didn't understand what he was talking about, and he decided to explain everything to him. Precious stones containing elements of ancient magic are called magic stones. After being processed to allow their use, they become gemstones. So far, he's right? He confirmed this and continued. Depending on the ancient magic embedded in them, items are divided into two types, those with special properties and items created using derivative properties. The golden feather-shaped ornament he holds in his right hand practices sorcery that allows him to control natural forces such as fire, water, earth, and wind. It's an attribute item, and the golden plant-shaped ornament he holds in his left hand is a derivative of a gemstone, causing various phenomena unrelated to any properties. It allows one to see through objects, sharpens hearing, and does many other things. He showed him a grimoire with magical stones already inserted, and said, the shape of the grooves on the right and left are different. The diagram on the left is a diagram for a gemstone with specific properties, and the one on the right is a diagram for a derivative piece of jewelry. Alan noted that it is these chains that awaken ancient sorcery, and Lucas confirmed this. They, mages, can use ancient magic because they have a grimoire, and a grimoire for a mage is the same as their own life. MC remembered that the teacher had said something similar. He would have been furious if Malik touched his grimoire. Lucas closed the book and said that the grimoire was perfect for its master. Its power level was on a completely different level, and magic was much easier to control with it. Alan wondered, does this grimoire really belong to you or not? Does that really affect its usability that much? Lucas asked. He wanted to have his own grimoire too, didn't he? That's why he took that reckless mission. He laughed awkwardly and confirmed it, thinking, his own grimoire will be the most reliable companion on his journey. The next morning they set off. The carriage took them to the village, and from there, they had to walk. Lucas was a little dissatisfied, as the ground was all loosened and covered in mud from the rain, and MC asked, is this a village of people working in the mine? But why are there no souls here? Lucas also found it strange. They entered the village, and everything around was destroyed. Alan looked around and asked, is the mine really that close? The guy confirmed it. The entrance should be right behind the village, and right after his words, a howl was heard. Several demonic wolves headed towards them, and MC asked, is this the same demon they need to subdue? Lucas immediately ran up to him and asked, he took the grimoire they gave him with him, right? He confirmed it, and while the pack of wolves was walking towards them, he took out the stones they gave him for this mission, fire and water. Then it seemed they also told him about the precious stone. Fire will quickly deal with them, but it would be bad if the flames spread. Lucas told him not to leave him so he could protect him, and Alan, inserting the stone into the grimoire, thanked him for his concern. But he could protect himself. The magic immediately activated, and he grinned and set to work. A bright spark of magic fell to the ground. He placed his hand on it, and as stones rose from the earth, he thought, this has quite a dense power. It's a little difficult to change, but he can handle it. The wolves rushed to attack, and the sand, under the influence of magic, rose into the air, became harder, and pierced the monsters' bodies and their cores. Lucas was shocked that he knew how to kill them, and MC said, to defeat a lower-ranking demon, you need to destroy their central stone. That's what it said in the book he read yesterday. The guy grinned and admitted that he was worthy of being the master's disciple and wanted to see what else he could do. After that, they began fighting together, Alan wielding sand, and his eldest, wind. Lucas lost sight of one wolf, and it would have sunk its teeth into it if not for Alan. They worked quite harmoniously. Suddenly, a loud cry came from the direction of the mine. Right then and there, a soldier was being attacked by wolves. Throwing aside the monsters in their path, they ran toward the mine. MC tried to reach the soldier with magic, but he was too far away. Suddenly, Lucas grabbed him by the shoulder and pulled him toward him, telling him not to lose the book, and cast the dancing wind spell. A gust of wind immediately threw them both into the sky. Alan clutched the grimoire tightly, afraid to let it go, and Lucas called out to him, giving him the signal. They were already very close, but the soldier immediately used magic, and a magic circle appeared on the ground, from which huge stone spikes grew and killed all the wolves. They ran up to the soldier. He was very happy to see the Grimoire Masters, and Lucas asked him to go to a safe place. When he left, a wolf came out of the mine, but this one was bigger than the others. Lucas said he was wondering why there were so many of them here. But these are their parents. The wolf growled loudly. MC saw a stone on the creature's forehead with a golden light inside. He asked if demons could be killed if the core itself was not destroyed. Lucas himself did not know, since no one had tried this, and asked if it was so important now. He answered him that he saw a light similar to a stone in the center of the core, and Lucas looked closely, but he could not see anything. Alan wondered if it was only he who saw it. Maybe it was some other light, or was there some connection? He smirked and said, "If you want to know, there is no choice but to try." He was puzzled, thinking how he should do this, and Lucas thought in bewilderment, was he really trying to get this central stone? He asked if he really saw the golden light in the central stone. MC confirmed it. The light was smaller than in a regular mana stone, but he could still see it. Realizing he wasn't lying, Lucas was surprised he could see something he couldn't, and Alan, looking excited, said he just wanted to look at it up close. He scratched his head awkwardly and agreed to help him do what he had in mind. He had a plan, right? He told him he would stop it and let him cut it with the wind stone while he held it. They got to work. Lucas cast a spell and thought this guy was using his head well. He used the Wind Link spell to hold the wolf in place and gave a signal to Alan. He climbed up to the entrance of the mine behind the wolf, placed the required mana stone in the grimoire, and imagined the ground around the demon turning into sand, finer than it was now. He needed the smallest grains. The wolf's paws began to sink into the sand. Everything MC had imagined was actually happening. And then, to keep the demon stuck, he poured water on its paws. When the wet sand had covered the wolf's body enough, he drew the water out and gave a signal to Lucas, who was already in the air. He waved his hand and cast the Wind Link spell at the wolf, and the wind blades hit the core, but they simply bounced off, which was definitely unexpected. Lucas said that the base was too hard, the wind alone wasn't enough, and Alan thought that wind arrow just looked incredibly sharp, and if that's not enough, what should they do? He went through all the mana stones in his palm, and when he saw a red one, an idea came to him. He asked Lucas to use his wind attack again, and while he was casting the spell, he inserted the red stone into the grimoire and thought that to work with heavy objects, you need to use heat, and add that to the wind. Will he be able to do it? He pointed his hand at Lucas. His wind slowly began to mix with the fire until it reached the desired concentration. Only then did Alan give the signal, and Lucas sent a fiery tornado at the wolf. The wind blades, combined with the flames, cut the core out of the beast's forehead, and it bounced off. Lucas was delighted that they had succeeded, and MC rushed at full speed toward the shining stone. He jumped from the top of the shaft and caught it with a smile, rejoicing at his success. Lucas caught him in the wind so he wouldn't crash and said he couldn't believe they actually did it. He really is special. They landed, and while Alan admired the stone, he thought, in terms of pure skill, he is already on par with a mid-level grimoire master, not to mention what he had just accomplished. He combined his own magic with someone else's spell, bringing such an unconventional idea to life with ease. He has natural talent. It seems he's gained an incredible junior apprentice. MC turned to him excitedly and handed him the stone, telling him to look at it. It really did shine with a golden glow. Compared to the mana stone, the glow was much weaker, but it was still visible. Lucas walked closer to take a closer look. He looked closely at the stone and frowned. He didn't see anything, but he promised to ask the master about it when they returned. If it really did contain ancient magic, perhaps they could extract its power and turn it into a weapon or something similar. The soldiers approached them, asking if they were okay, and Lucas told them they were already finished. Are any of the villagers injured? Alan continued to admire the beauty of the stone, and suddenly he sensed something coming from the depths of the mine. It felt like someone was calling him. Lucas called out to him, but he didn't respond, and one of the magic stones began to glow brightly. Lucas finally reached him and said, "Before examining the vein, they need to check the jewelry and the book." He headed toward the village. MC turned back to the mine one last time and frowned, and his elder began to hurry him. They stopped at a guest house. Alan sat and watched the villagers rejoice, and Lucas was inside, checking the items. He said the book and stones were fine, and MC asked, so they would now check the vein inside the mine? He answered him, when a vein of a potential mana stone is discovered, standard procedure for Grimoire Masters is to inspect it on site and confirm its authenticity. Alan was excited. Were there more stones? Or was it just one large boulder? He was eager to see it and suggested they set off, but besides the stones, he was intrigued by the strange sensation he'd experienced earlier. An old man approached them and told them to wait. They were planning to enter the mine, weren't they? He forbade them. They couldn't irritate Aonuma even more. Lucas asked who he was talking about, and he told them that he had lived in this mine since ancient times, the guardian of the forest. Lucas thought about it, and the old man's son approached his father and asked him to stop, but he waved him off and exclaimed, because the young people stopped worshipping Aonuma, They were attacked by demons. MC asked the elder what they would do, and he told him that they didn't really have a choice. He waved at the old man with a smile and apologized to him, but they had work to do, so they would go. The boy grabbed his father, and he angrily ordered them to stop. Entering the mine, Lucas said, by forest guardian, he probably meant a ghost beast, but he had never heard of one in this place. Ghost beasts are creatures that are neither animals nor demons. Their bodies are made of mana stone. At the mention of this, Alan's eyes immediately lit up with delight, and Lucas seemed to begin to understand him. They are said to live for over 1,000 years and freely use ancient magic. At least, that's what the legends say. It is believed that many ghost beasts still live throughout the continent. Probably, the magic tower does not even know about many things. Because they are so rare, like the Aonuma the old man spoke of, they are often revered as gods. MC wondered if there was one here, and Lucas answered him, "Who knows? If such a thing exists, then most likely it is an unregistered ghost beast, according to the records of the magic tower. But he should not think that meeting such a beast is so easy. After all, they are gods. The spirit beasts act on their own whim, and they have a special affection for the mage, and may even give him a gift. There are indeed texts that mention such things, but the ancient books only mention them in passing. So it's essentially a fairy tale." Alan smiled and thought, so he's a god who gives gifts? What would a body made entirely of mana stones look like? If they live that long, would they be able to tell what these mana stones even are? And that voice he heard earlier, could it belong to a spirit beast? He wished he could communicate with one of them. Lucas saw a glow ahead and said they had arrived. MC immediately looked up, his eyes widening in surprise at the sight of a vein of mana stones. He walked up to it and touched one of the stones, saying that their light was simply beautiful. Lucas said, "Since they see the golden light, the examination seems quite simple," and his junior asked, "People who can't see it use tools, right?" He smiled, glad he remembered his words, and suddenly Alan felt that feeling again. He turned around, looking for the source of this strange sensation, and then the floor beneath his feet simply disappeared, and he fell into a hole with a loud, piercing scream. He landed rather awkwardly, right on his face, but quickly came to his senses and looked up. What he saw greatly delighted him. The entire cave was strewn with mana stones. His eyes simply darted around. This sight seemed incredibly beautiful to him, and Lucas's worried voice came from above, asking if he was okay. He asked him to wait a bit while he looked for a way down, and MC approached the huge crystal and thought, the deeper he goes, the darker the blue becomes. As if there is something there. A horn emerged from the mana stone. Then the rest of the body appeared, accompanied by splashes of water. Alan looked at it in surprise. A living creature was in front of him, a horned whale. The creature approached him and said that he smelled a familiar scent. MC was cautious, because he didn't know whether it was hostile or not, and the whale told him not to look at it like that. He was just an old soul. Now Alan understood. It wasn't a sound. He felt like the words were echoing inside him. This creature's body was made of magic stones, and he asked, was it a ghost beast? The whale answered him that people called them that, and MC remembered Lucas's words about them and asked, was he calling him? The whale answered him that he was attracted by the nostalgic scent. His eyes, he sees everything, right? His eyes allow him to see the same world as they do, special eyes. There used to be many like them, but for the last few centuries he had hardly seen anyone. Alan asked, does he mean golden light? Whale clarified, by golden light he meant ancient magic. Their eyes reflect the glow of the mana that fills this world. They exist to see the magic sealed in the stones, magic preserved from ancient times. He wondered why others couldn't see it, and the whale rephrased, why are humans given such eyes? Unfortunately, he didn't know. However, an old acquaintance of his called it a treasure, bestowed only on those loved by the whole world. That's what he told him. MC looked at his hands and thought about the beast's words, after which he stared in fascination at the shining stones in front of him and touched them. He thought it was so wonderful. It looked like ice. He felt like cold, heavy water was flowing. He pressed his face to the creature's body and said, ghost beasts are truly beautiful. Whale thanked him. It was the first time in his life that such words had been spoken to him. The next time he meets the King of the Seven Stars, he will be proud to have met such a person. The King of the Seven Stars is the pinnacle of ancient beings. 7 noble kings, likened to the 7 stars. Those who have lived the longest and have the greatest power. The pillars of the world. The thought that there were 7 beings even more incredible than this whale made Alan nervous. The whale said that he had not seen them for a very long time. It seemed that he finally spoke out. For the first time in a long time, he said too much. A person gets tired very quickly when he lives as long as he does, and now it is time for him to return to sleep. MC inquired where the kings of the 7 stars are, and what is ancient magic. The whale told him not to worry. He is the beloved child of the world. From him, he feels love from all over the world, which radiates an exceptional radiance. If he continues to walk his path with these eyes, the 7-star kings will surely intersect with his destiny. They will certainly show him the way to the source of magic. He asked what source of magic he was talking about, to which the beast only replied, it would be best for him to learn the details from kings themselves. Now let him extend his hand to the little mage who looks into the future he will bestow a humble blessing. This is quite complex magic, but if it is him, he is sure he will be able to use it. The horn of the ghostly beast lightly touched his palms. It gave him a stone filled with mana from hundreds of years of his life. Alan's eyes sparkled. Water splashed inside this stone and also emitted a purple and gold glow. Finally, the whale said, "If it is him, the child beloved by the world, then he is sure he will achieve his goal." The ghostly beast returned back to the mana stone, and MC excitedly asked him to wait. He had more questions. "What is this primeval stone? What is it?" The spirit beast sank completely into the stone and was blinded by a bright light, and then Lucas's worried voice called out to him. Finally finding it, he sighed with relief, while Alan quickly looked around in confusion, wondering what had happened to the cave. Indeed, it had just been littered with mana stones, but now it was a different place. But he felt that the spirit beast was somewhere in this mine. Lucas looked at the stone in his hands in surprise and asked what he was holding. He puzzledly replied that it was the spirit beast's blessing, and Lucas didn't even believe what he heard at first. MC thought he didn't understand anything and said that it was just the spirit beast's stone, and since Lucas was still in shock, he didn't even know how to explain it to him. When they returned to the magic tower, they gathered in the research lab with their teacher. Klaus asked, "So, he brought the demon's central stone and received the phantom beast stone?" Indeed, both of them were clearly different from the magic stones that were usually mined. "What about the mission report?" Lucas told him that he hadn't submitted one yet, and he simply asked him to write down the mission objectives. As for the phantom beast, the gift, and the demon's central stone, he would report it to his superiors himself. After that, he called out to Alan, who was examining the stone, and told him to polish the phantom beast gift himself and turn it into a jewel. He was very happy about this, and the old man said he will prepare tools for polishing the stone. The demon's central stone should also serve as excellent research material. Preparing the equipment will take some time, so let them go and send the mission report for now, and at the same time, pick up Alan's grimoire. Upon hearing about the grimoire, he immediately jumped up, grabbed Lucas by the arm, and ran with him toward the exit, telling him to hurry. Lucas trudged warily after him. They handed in their reports and finally made their way to the grimoire vault. The vault door was sealed with huge chains and a lock. The guards unlocked it, and MC stepped inside. Finally, it was time to choose his own grimoire. After some time, the guests gathered in the room. People were surprised. Is this the grimoire selection ceremony? Who will it be this time? Are they kidding? Is this the new slave? What? Hasn't this slave only been here for about 2 days since he qualified? What kind of idiot is he? There's no way in hell a mere new slave would be accepted by the grimoire. One of the girls said she heard the book was gold for Master Klaus. These were exaggerated rumors. He'd seen the entries in the memories. The book simply glowed slightly. Caitlin turned to Alan and asked if he was really going to try this. The protagonist was inside the room, wondering if the grimoire was really inside. Lucas said that this was the grimoire library. It was where the masterless grimoires were kept. Let him listen to him. At the grimoire selection ceremony, the grimoire itself chooses its user. He is under no circumstances allowed to touch the memoirs on the shelves. If the grimoire selected him, he must take it with him. Otherwise, he'll return empty-handed. Alan asked if that meant he wouldn't receive it if the grimoire didn't choose him. Lucas answered correctly. That's why he needed the right to participate in the ceremony. Mages who are too inexperienced won't be recognized as grimoires. If he wasn't chosen, he'd have to train again, complete missions, and earn the right to participate again. He had to take it with him. When Lucas handed him the magic ball, Alan, surprised, asked what it was. In his hand, the ball began to unfold with wings, and Lucas explained that it was a magical instrument for observing what was happening in front of them from a distance. To prevent any foul play during the selection ceremony, according to the rules, video footage is sent to memories. Their images should already be appearing in memories. He realized it was flying, and those around him were amazed that they understood everything. They suddenly took off, and it was simply amazing. Lucas had said not to worry, he'd be here, and at that moment, he exhaled with relief and wished the protagonist good luck. When Alan entered, he was confident, and he wondered what it was. It was so quiet here, but he felt like someone was breathing nearby. He turned around and realized that this color, he could see, wasn't all the books here were grimoires, and perhaps the glowing ones were them. He thought he shouldn't touch it himself, as Lucas had said, but how would he know the grimoire had chosen him? He looked around questioningly, when suddenly he heard a crash and turned around, frightened, screaming, "What is that?" He thought it was a demon, but then realized it was something else. A magical wolf approached him. To Alan's great surprise, and he looked the creature in the eyes. The wolf began to run away from him, and Alan rushed after it. As he ran, he stopped abruptly and saw a wolf glowing on a bookshelf, and Alan marveled at it. He stared into the creature's bright magical eyes and didn't know what to do. At that moment, the wolf pointed its nose to the side, and a magical symbol began to glow on the creature's forehead. The entire room was illuminated by a bright magical light, and Alan began screaming in surprise and dodging the flashes. He fell to the floor in fright, and at that moment, a magical book appeared above him. The people around him were surprised. Is this a joke? This light isn't magic, right? How powerful is this slave? People were horrified and confused. Weren't these just rumors? Even when Master Klaus was there, everything was different. They had never seen such ceremonies. This glow is abnormal. Could it be related to its connection with ancient magic? When Alan looked above him, he noticed the book and extended his hands to take it. The book landed in his hands, and he felt a movement of mana like the heartbeat of a living being. This warmth. So this is his grimoire, right? He pressed it to his chest and stood there for a moment. Klaus, who was watching, reflected on how he knew he had enormous potential, but hadn't expected so much. When the protagonist returned, he informed his master that he had received the book. Klaus replied that he knew this because he had been watching him. Alan handed the book to him, and Klaus remarked that it looked old, but it was a good book. He should be proud of it. First, they needed to sit down. He wanted to talk to them about something. When the men sat down at the table, Alan drank a cup of drink, and Klaus said that regarding the incense of the ghost beast, he had thought about it for a long time. He called Alan and asked him to tell him again what he had told him. That ghost beast had called him a child loved by the whole world, or something like that. And these eyes that see the golden light see the same world as the phantom beasts. And then the kings of the 7 stars will lead him to the source of magic. Klaus said that he had just become a grimoire master, so he thought it might be too early, but it was probably best to tell him now. The 7 stars are this group and the families of powerful and famous phantom beasts that exist on the continent. These are stone guardians, elves, humans, dragons, demons. Each of these areas is ruled by a phantom beast, and Alan said that based on that, shouldn't there only be 5 of the 7-star kings? Klaus replied that the whereabouts of the remaining 2 are still unknown. Some claim they travel across the continent. Lucas said that he and the master had been studying this question for a long time, but still hadn't found an answer. Alan was surprised, but what about the source of magic? Klaus said that the source of magic probably refers to something called the primeval mana stone. Alan was surprised. The primeval mana stone? Klaus replied that the name had been passed down through ancient legends. The stone contained the world's first magic. There were theories, but its true nature was unknown. If someone were to find this stone and summon the magic hidden within, the unanswered questions of hundreds of years might finally be revealed, and the true nature of ancient magic might be answered. He turned to Alan and said that the ghostly beast he had encountered had said that the kings of the 7 stars would lead him. Hadn't he? Alan replied yes, and Klaus suggested that perhaps he was destined to find the kings and meet them. This was necessary to obtain the primeval mana stone. Alan wondered if the magic stone he had received had been struck by the ghostly beast. Though it wasn't from a king, it was overflowing with so much light. Then the king's stones must be even more incredible. He turned to the master and announced his decision. He would become a great mage and set out on a journey across the continent to find the king of the 7 stars. And then he's going to see every mana stone in this world. Klaus said that if this is his plan, he'd better prepare well. This information is only available to high-ranking mages, even within the magic tower. But an invasion of Western demons is currently wreaking havoc across the continent. People say it's driven by the hunt for existing phantom beasts. And in fact, there have been reports in the Stone Guardians territory of a phantom beast escaping pursuit being attacked and killed. If he's going to chase kings, he'll have to face demons more often than most. For this reason alone, he must stand strong, Alan, the most powerful grimoire master of them all. He'd found a good target for himself. First, he needed to give his grimoire for maintenance and simply show his book in the basement workshop. Alan realized that this was exactly what the master had told him, but something was wrong. After some time, he found himself in the workshop area, inside the magic tower. Alan wondered why it was so busy, and one of the blacksmiths asked if he was here to service the book. He answered yes, but didn't understand why everyone was appearing from behind. The guy answered okay and offered to take a look. He examined the book and, smiling, said everything was clear. It wouldn't take long. Let him go inside and wait a bit. Alan asked if he could tell just by looking. The guy answered more or less. He found a good book and he would take care of it. Alan thought about this man. His ears were rather strange, and the guy turned and asked if he wasn't used to seeing things like this. He was a forest dweller, and handling magical tools and memoirs requires special techniques inaccessible to humans. They are forest dwellers. Those stone guardians over there manage the workshop. Those aren't polished mana stones, and Alan wondered if that was a lantern next to them. How wonderful. They use fragments of magical stones. You can't make jewelry from that to power magical tools. And thinking about it, an idea occurred to him. He'd heard that a ghostly beast lived in the elven lands, and the boy replied yes, it protected their land. What was it? He wondered. Alan came closer and, smiling, said yes, he wanted to meet it. What did it look like? What was its power or color? The boy replied that he was just a craftsman and didn't know these details. If they were guards, they would know everything about them. Alan was surprised and asked again, guardians? The boy replied that among the forest dwellers, there were those whose life's work was to protect the ghostly beast. These guys knew more about it than anyone else among all the forest dwellers. Alan looked at his palms in surprise, and the boy came closer and whispered in his ear that since he smelled quite pleasant to a human, he would tell him something good. Alan was surprised that he smelled at all, and the forest dwellers said that the time would soon come for a trade caravan to travel, and they would arrive from the elven lands. Each year, the caravan is accompanied by one highly qualified guard, and Alan asked again, "Really?" He replied that it was a secret. Sometime later, a young man rested on the cart. He sighed from being accompanied, and it was so annoying. The coachman announced that they would soon arrive at the magic tower, and the boy replied that that was good. He crossed his legs and continued to wait, grinning at the sight of the magic tower. Klaus was quite an interesting character, but in the end he couldn't resist the guard. As the boy thought about this, he suddenly exclaimed, "Is there anyone interesting with any substance?" At that moment, Alan held the book above himself, overjoyed to receive it. Sometime later, a new day dawned, and the protagonist held the magic stone in his hands, hopefully saying that it was almost done. Lucas entered his room, calling Alan and asking, "You polished them all night? He finished the mail? Had he noticed?" It seemed the traveling merchants had begun their work. Alan muttered in a daze. Traveling merchants. There was indeed a bustle on the street, and many people had appeared at the market. Alan walked through these streets and was amazed at everything he saw. They were full of things he had never seen before, so he examined everything with incredible amazement. The sellers showed him various items and asked, "Isn't this great? This is a traditional craft passed down from generation to generation among the forest dwellers." When Alan heard about this, he was stunned and exclaimed, "Forest dwellers." It was close, because he had almost forgotten his goal. He waved to the saleswoman, who wished him a safe journey. Some forest dwellers were patrolling nearby, but he remembered the words of the blacksmith, who had heard that there was supposed to be a highly qualified guard accompanying traveling merchants. Alan thought he didn't see a single forest dweller who matched this image. This place is strange. Are they really trading animals? Suddenly, an explosion occurred, followed by two horses jumping out in front of the people. He didn't understand what this meant, and suddenly the villagers began screaming in panic that they needed to run away. They were terrified of everything that was happening, and Alan was stunned and surprised. Had the animals really escaped? No. He had a bad feeling about this. They saw a monster and started screaming. "Is that a Morlock?" But something was wrong. The Morlock roared loudly and began attacking the people. The villagers shouted for everyone else to evacuate immediately, when suddenly Alan ran straight towards the monster. One of the boys shouted at him, "Hey kid," but the protagonist ignored him. The people shouted for water, because it was in the sweet water, and they should be timid, but no one understood what was happening right now. Alan opened his book and began using magical powers, while the other forest dwellers tried to fight the Morlock. When Alan raised two fingers, a bright flash of light occurred, and no one understood. Could this child have really done this? It looked like a master grimoire. Alan was confident in his abilities, and suddenly they began asking him, "Does he want to die?" The boy expressed his gratitude for saving his comrade, but he couldn't handle this creature. "Let him, leave it to them, the forest dwellers." Alan asked again, "Leave it to them?" He saw the others struggling to cope with the creature and shouting at each other to pull themselves together. Arrows wouldn't work. They weren't getting anywhere. The boy said they'd be fine if only Shumil were here. People kept shouting that they couldn't find him anywhere. But where was this good-for-nothing, and what was he doing? Meanwhile, Shumil lay uninhibited on the rooftop. Many elves rushed to save their city and people, while Alan continued to destroy the creature alone. He was surprised by the completely different speed of his magic summoning. Even thinking that the energy consumption would require such effort was daunting. He continued to try to cope with the creature, but nothing worked, when suddenly a bright flash of light occurred, and he realized this was his grimoire. He picked up another magic stone and, gritting his teeth, created a whirlpool of water above. When Morlock saw this, he was dumbfounded, and the protagonist directed all his power at the creature. He continued to fight alone, and the elves were surprised. He was manipulating sand even though he wasn't a demon. One of the boys shouted, "Enough, he has to run away from here, apprentice." Alan was still near the monster, and continued to use his powers alone. The boys shouted at him, "Student," but at that moment there was an explosion, and the boy was dumbfounded when he saw that Alan was safe and sound, and still using magic. The guys looked at him in surprise and couldn't believe it. A human could do such a thing. One of the guys chuckled when he saw what was happening and didn't intervene. Alan ran from place to place and realized it was getting nowhere. His different shades of powers were clashing. As he realized over there, he figured he'd hit the spot that was causing him the most discomfort, and when he did, Morlock froze and suddenly began to growl. Alan also tensed and waited, when suddenly Shumil approached him, saying that it wasn't bad, the shorty, and waved. Alan realized this man was on a completely different level compared to the other forest dwellers. He was strong, and Shumil asked, did he scare him? The surprised people shouted his name, and Alan realized it was definitely him, the guard. Shumil greeted them, and the guys surrounded him, asking where he'd been. Thanks to him for that. They continued shouting his name, when suddenly an angry elf approached him, grabbed him by the clothes, and started screaming. Where had he been all this time? If he'd solved this problem right away, no one would have gotten so badly hurt. Shumil asked him not to be so angry, because he'd done his job, hadn't he? The guy continued shouting. Does he even understand his position? He asked again. Do they, guys, know their place? He tossed the guy aside and asked, aren't they ashamed that so many forest warriors had banded together and were using a human child as a shield? He really is strong, Shorty. Alan looked him in the eyes, and Shumil said he looked very funny. At that moment, they heard a sound from Morlock, who didn't understand. Is this a joke? Shumil also asked, his face distorted with surprise. Is this serious? Alan turned around and saw that Morlock was missing his head, and at that moment, Shumil grabbed him by the neck and climbed onto the roof, muttering that it was close. Is he okay? Alan said, almost, and Shumil said it was his fault. The monster continued to move forward and spew magical beams of light, and Alan thought that, usually after that, it shouldn't move, which meant that everything was wrong. He looked at the monster with disdain, and Shumil said, Shorty, he'll cover him. He thinks he can finish this? Alan replied that he wouldn't mind helping, but in exchange for finishing, he would have to fulfill one of his requests, Mr. Guardian. He smiled and said he'd think about it if he managed to finish everything properly. Alan thought that was good, because now he could ask him about the ghostly beasts. It was the perfect time, and at that moment, he took the magic ball and began to cast a spell. He decided to see how far he could push his grimoires. Well, then, he'd do whatever he wanted, so let him cover him properly. After these words, he rushed into battle. The magic was flowing more and more, and this was his grimoire. He rejoiced and continued to use his powers, clashing with the monsters. The surrounding elves watched in amazement, unable to tear their eyes away. As their powers clashed, Alan said he needed one more blow. His powers absorbed the monsters right in front of everyone, and suddenly the creature's magic evaporated. Shumil said he wasn't holding back, when suddenly Alan shouted with a smile on his face, and Shumil was surprised. Alan said, do you see that black pulsating spot? He should shoot at it. Shumil asked again. There? He took his arrow and, swinging it, said he was doing well. When Shumil hit the right core, it glowed bright green and rose into the air. They asked the elf if they had really succeeded. At that moment, strange clots began to emanate from the monster, causing the guys' faces to change, as they didn't understand what was happening. Blood began to pour from the monster, and the elves shouted for everyone to evacuate. Everyone needed to evacuate now. Alan was frightened, and at that moment, a bright explosion erupted from the monster. But the protagonist managed to capture it with his own powers, and once again seal the monster's powers with his magical spells. The elves asked again, is it all over and are they saved? Alan said nothing and continued to hold on to his magic. The elves continued their work, and when Alan snatched the core into his hands, he realized it was just like that time. He'd seen this before. Shumil grabbed him and said, Shorty, you're really strong. Alan pushed him aside with his shoulder and said he wanted to ask him something. Shumil wondered if this was the favor he'd mentioned. Alan replied yes, let him tell him about the king of the ghostly beasts in the land of the forest dwellers. What does it look like? What kind does it use? And how can he meet it? Shumil asked again. Why does he need to know what it is? When he looked above himself, he became frightened and suddenly grabbed Alan by the collar, pressing him to himself and saying he understood everything. The protagonist didn't understand? Or do the forest dwellers like to smell people? He said that he smelled like a ghost beast. Did that mean anything to him? Then he would reveal a little secret. The ghost beast that the forest dwellers worship is one creature. It reads the wind, from the past, present, to the future. It is the king of wisdom, knowing everything on the continent. He asked, can he even see the future? Shumil replied, be careful, because he might even be eavesdropping on this conversation. Alan didn't understand what he meant, and when Shumil stood up and said that if he said anything else, he would definitely be angry with him. The king of the forest dwellers knows everything in this world, and that's all he can say. If he wants to see for himself, then he should take part in the festival held once every 50 years in the land of the forest dwellers. If he can defeat the guards, he will be granted an audience with the king. The next festival is in 2 years, right? This is the perfect time for him, Shorty. Alan replied that there was no need to wait 2 years, was there? Right here and now? He just needed to defeat him, right? He took out his magical tools, and Shumil said that he really was an interesting person, but that was a big word, so let him call him. Defeating him alone meant nothing. He needed to defeat all the guards. He should be significantly stronger and return in 2 years when that time came. And then he would play with him. Alan asked again, would he play with him? Shumil didn't answer, and Alan said that he shouldn't be so frivolous, because he would definitely win. At that moment, Klaus approached him, which greatly surprised the protagonist, and he came closer. Alan asked, isn't this the work of that old man? He smirked and asked again, can he take it? The same core appeared in his hands, and Shumil, seeing Klaus, asked, is it him? It had been so long since they last saw each other. Klaus asked again, is he one of the guardians? Shumil started shouting, this insolent fellow has turned into a real old man. Alan asked again, do they really know each other? He replied that he had fought with a family of guardians, where he participated in the last festival but lost to Shumil. Was that Shorty his apprentice? They were interrupted by someone shouting Shumil's name, and Shumil cursed. What kind of annoying person has come? He ran off to the side and told the guys that they would see each other later. Alan shouted for him to stop, but Shumil shouted, The shorty will wait for him in the lands of the forest dwellers. Alan mentioned he still had a few questions, and Klaus asked if he was planning to attend the forest dwellers festival. Alan confirmed this, and Klaus said the guardians were much stronger than he was now. He wouldn't be participating in this festival anymore, but he could very well achieve it. At that moment, Alan replied yes, the king of the 7 stars, in the form of a huge eagle. He looked forward to meeting him. A few days later, Alan folded his magic stone into a special dome and thought about the same material, items from the laboratory. Considering the material, it was hard to believe it was brought by the forest dwellers who revere ghostly beasts. If so, then someone had orchestrated this? Klaus continued to wonder if it was Alan. His travels could be even more grueling than he expected. At that moment, his phone rang, and he picked it up and asked what was going on. He was told, "Master, there's an emergency message. An army of demons is heading for the southern city." He was terrified. At that moment, Alan grabbed the magic stone in his hands and proudly declared that he had done it. Lucas asked again, "Is he finished?" He didn't answer, thinking only that it was the mana stone of a ghost beast. "I wonder what ancient magic was stored inside?" Lucas asked to see it too, but suddenly he froze and started shouting, "Stop! He doesn't know what kind of magic this is. You can't do that in this room." Alan smiled and watched the bright glow that appeared straight out of the book. At that moment, a bright light appeared throughout the room, and Alan didn't understand what had happened. They both watched inquiringly, and Alan shouted, "Why is this?" He definitely felt the immense power of magic, but it felt like it was slipping through his fingers. He just couldn't hold on to it. Klaus said that it would likely require a certain amount of talent to handle it. The more complex the powerful ancient magic, the more skill is required to unlock its potential. All he could do was keep trying until he succeeded. He thought about it now that he thought about it. That ghostly beast mentioned something about it being difficult to handle, and he was eagerly awaiting what kind of magic it was. But more importantly, they had an urgent matter now. Klaus reported that an army of demons was approaching the southern city. They were sending reinforcements consisting of mid and high-level mages, so they would also arrive. Alan said that he would go too, and Klaus apologized and asked, "But could he stay here?" He asked angrily. "Why?" Klaus said, "As capable as he is, something is bothering him." Alan didn't understand what exactly the master was afraid of. The next morning, he climbed the steps and heard the guys discussing. Yes, it was reported that a rescue team had arrived in the southern city. Alan realized that the master and the others, maybe he had to force them to come with them. They had summoned him here, but something was wrong with his identification. Caitlin turned to him and said his name happily. He greeted her and realized he was completely at a loss for words with this girl. Caitlin asked if he'd gotten used to the magic tower yet. Alan confirmed, "Yes, of course," when suddenly they heard a loud roar. A siren sounded in the tower, warning, "Attention, prisoner escape confirmed, danger level high. All mages inside the tower must evacuate immediately." He wondered if this was really a prison break. A guy ran up to them, shouting to call the tower master immediately, and Caitlin asked, "What happened?" The guy clutched his head and tremblingly muttered that all the guards in the dungeon had been killed. Who could have done such a thing? They needed to call the master quickly. Caitlin apologized to Alan and said he heard the announcement and needed to focus on evacuation. Everyone ran in different directions, and Alan wondered if whoever killed the guards might still be inside the tower. He turned sharply and looked toward the corridor, then took a step and went around the corner. He followed the man with long hair and realized it was him, Malik. What was he doing here? Alan came closer and opened his book, after which the old man turned and asked, "Is he that insolent man?" He was the one who had interfered with his plans, the damned slave. The protagonist began to think that something was wrong, and Malik said, "Peace, he must direct the measure in the right direction." That's what he told him. He said he had the right to do so. Alan asked again, what was he talking about? Malik replied that he would prove his worth. He should feel honored because he would witness this event. After he got rid of every soul in this country and became the most powerful being, he would become the new king of the 7 stars. Until now. At that moment, everything around lit up with bright flashes of light from the old man's lightning-fast dark magic. He tore a hole in the tower and climbed out, after which a bright glow erupted. Alan began coughing from the strong wind and fell to the floor. When he rose, he heard Malik laughing loudly at him. He was surprised. Could it really be him? Malik transformed into a terrifying creature with bright red eyes and leaped out of the fortress. When Alan grabbed the stones, he realized that nothing in the world would let him go, so he jumped out of the tower. At that moment, people began shouting, "Emergency situation! All grimoire masters, prepare and destroy all demons appearing in the capital. Those who cannot fight must first and foremost protect the civilians and defend the capital at all costs." Alan was surprised at what was happening. He landed easily and went in search of Malik. Meanwhile, monsters were attacking and killing ordinary citizens. People begged for mercy, but at that moment, Alan destroyed several monsters along the way, for which they thanked him. He looked ahead and heard a loud, terrifying scream, which stunned him. More and more people were in the square, trying to flee from the monsters in fear, but they attacked and killed them. Alan grabbed the book and destroyed several more monsters. He didn't understand where all these demons came from and continued casting his spell, when suddenly he heard Malik screaming, "Yes, power is overwhelming him." Alan realized he had found him, and Malik was shouting that right now he could easily kill even a ghostly beast, and if he did, he would certainly be pleased. Let them not let them escape. A young man was running away with a small child in his arms, frightened and trying to protect him, when suddenly everything around him glowed with a bright golden light. Alan tried to protect the people and told them not to misunderstand him. He was his enemy. He looked him in the eyes with disdain and then said, "Small fry like them are incapable of anything." A bright magical ball began to glow in his chest, which Alan immediately noticed and pulled out from his book. Malik shouted that they were not his rivals when suddenly everyone tried to use their magic to protect the city, and many bright and varied forces collided into a single ball. People continued to try to destroy their enemy, but nothing worked. Malik continued to admire his strength when suddenly the heads and hands of several people were severed. Alan realized that he regenerated even after the attack. How could he defeat him? Is he even a demon? Is that ice that this creature has? Malik landed and said he'd been wrong all along. He'd thought he didn't need it, and that he needed to be so obsessed with something like that. But now he crushed it into tiny pieces in his hand, and Alan was terrified and screamed. He shattered his magic ball into tiny pieces and said it was so easy to get to this. Let him look at his power right now. He'll burn everything to the ground, including him. And when he's done with him, the next ones will be the ghost beasts. He'll exterminate every single ghost beast on this continent, and he'll also become king of the 7 stars. People screamed that it was impossible that the human kingdom would come to an end. The protagonist said, "Not yet. A piece of shit like him will go straight to hell, and he'll be the one sending him there." Malik screamed, as if someone like him could ever defeat him. Alan pulled out his bright ball and declared that he would meet them, the ghostly beasts and the kings of the 7 stars. He exclaimed, "What happened?" He thought he'd be sent to hell? At that moment, blood gushed from the protagonist's back, and he screamed, "Do it if you can." He cast the Furious Stream spell, a powerful force that raged within him like chaos. With such power, he could definitely defeat him. Malik screamed at him to die, and the protagonist was thrown aside. He looked ahead in fear, only to see the very wolf creature that had come to his defense. Alan asked, "Will this help?" The wolf actually began to protect him with its magic, and at that moment, the protagonist realized that, no matter how difficult the magic, he would definitely master it. He smiled, declaring that this was his path. The entire square lit up with a bright light, and Malik didn't understand what that light was. He covered his face with his hand, and the people around him were also stunned, wondering what was happening here. Alan declared he would conquer the future and, grinning, destroyed his opponent's power. The men watching continued to scream. They helped carry the wounded people away on stretchers, when they suddenly became distracted and began asking if it was really a demon. Caitlin was frightened and began to cry, then suddenly realized how beautiful it was. Malik found himself in the depths of his own vines and screamed, "What kind of magic is this?" Alan thought it was incredible. If he relaxed even for a second, he felt like the answer would crush him, but it was okay. He felt the power accepting him, the book telling him what to do. Malik screamed that he was a bastard. What did he think he was doing now? At that moment, he struck his opponent and declared that this was liberation. Malik clutched his head and began to scream in pain, not understanding what that meant. Blood began to spurt from his eyes, and Alan announced that the target had been selected. A bright whale appeared in the sky, from which streams of water began to flow directly into the heads of the remaining monsters who were still fighting with the people. Alan said Malik would allow him to demonstrate a power he could never attain. Malik was dumbfounded by what he saw, and at that moment, a magic circle appeared right among the people, and Alan screamed that this was the power of ancient magic. Malik screamed that he was just a pathetic slave, but Alan spoke, "Area of the Ice Flower Garden." After this spell, a huge stream of ice began to spread toward Malik, and a moment later, engulfed everything around him. Malik screamed in pain and horror. What was this and why wasn't it breaking? He had absolutely no understanding of what was happening, and Alan declared that it was useless. This was his end. He clenched his fist, and Malik screamed that he was damned, and a moment later, he found himself inside this ice block. When Alan completed the task, he smiled and thanked his magical creature, waving his hand. Everyone around him saw this magic and was amazed, after which a bright sun and rainbow appeared in the city. Everyone laughed, smiled, and rejoiced that it was all over. Alan realized it was the ancient magic of the spirit beasts. A man watching from the side reported that Malik had lost. As expected, humans are too fragile in both body and mind. However, they had collected sufficient data on the denomination, and the forest dwellers' guardians must make a few adjustments. Their pawns have already been deployed in each territory, so please don't worry. To achieve their goal, he plans to entrust a special task to a child with the power of a spirit beast. Everything will be as he wishes. He is the only one who can restore this world to its original form. Please let him lead them to the 8th Star King. Sometime later, a sudden demon attack on the people in the tower occurred, and the boys grabbed each other after an emotional outburst. Rumors spread quickly about the story of the grimoire student who saved the capital. Alan received compliments, admiration, and flowers. After a while, Lucas came running to him, shouting his name and running into the living room, asking, "Is he here?" He looked up at the balcony, then ran into the protagonist's room and stopped. He didn't understand how he could sleep. He was doing well, and Alan said that the stones were still there. But before he could finish, Klaus suddenly asked, "Wait, what did they say?" He was in the king's office, and he asked again, "Didn't he hear?" He offered to grant his student titles and territory. A whale swims across the sky, and commoners revere this magnificent ancient magic as a guardian deity. Even stubborn aristocrats are preparing to donate to the tower. It was this child who saved this country, and it was only natural to reward him, right? Klaus wondered how much he wanted to associate himself with this country by giving him territory and status. He replied that, with all due respect, his student was too young to receive such rewards, and he should refuse immediately. He replied that if he said so, nothing could be done about it. He would not go so far as to demand protection or surveillance, but let him ensure that he was raised properly as a shield for their nation. Klaus answered well, and when he left the office, he realized what a fool he had been. He could never tie a child who so deeply yearned for freedom to this country. He looked out the window into the distance and mentally asked Alan, "Is that right?" When he entered his room, he reported that these were all gifts from aristocrats. Alan was surprised. Were these all gifts for him? There was even incredibly expensive jewelry. Klaus said that everyone wanted to express their gratitude to him for saving the capital. Obviously, they simply wanted to establish a connection with the hero. Although, apparently, the boy doesn't understand this at all. When Lucas mentioned this, Alan drew his attention to himself and, holding up a magic ball, said that this setting was intended for industrial jewelry, right? Lucas paused and asked him to wait. After all, this was rutile from the lands of the forest dwellers, another rare specimen. Alan shouted to the master that he could keep it all for himself, right? Could he try it all? Klaus thought that when it came to attribute stones, he was undoubtedly the most skilled in this country. But at this rate, he won't be ready for the forest dwellers' ritual. He needs to gain even more strength over the next 2 years. So they need to go to the training grounds. Alan was surprised and asked again, "Really?" Klaus said he'd teach him how to activate the magic that unites both attributed and derived stones. People were wondering why the Tower Master was at the training grounds. Was he with that genius and Lucas? Wait, is that the guy who saved the capital with that whale? Everyone started discussing the main character, who was continuing his training. Klaus asked, "Well, should they begin?" He explained, "Tree active stones come in sensory, visual, material, and formless types. They can be broadly divided into 4 types, and today, he'll tell them about this type of material. Giving form to an elemental stone is a method of enhancing its destructive power. Pure magic using elemental stones. If you add a material stone and combine them, they create a magical form and can increase their power." He demonstrated how it works with an example, and continued to say that, regardless of rank, only a few mages are capable of such combinations. Alan was stunned when he saw this and couldn't move. There were currently only about 10 of them in the tower, and given his affinity for ancient magic, he could do it in about a year of training. He wondered if this was the inability of high mages that required years of training. Even if he was a hero who saved the capital, that was a different matter. Lucas asked if he would be all right. Alan confirmed that he would be. And at that moment, bright sparks emanated from the book in the office. So this power of form, if this blueprint for water magic was applied, everything would work. Klaus reported that, as expected, it couldn't be done immediately, and Alan realized that deep within this power was form. He released the magic from his hand and found himself in the forest. Klaus was stunned when he saw this, and Lucas confirmed that he had never seen anything like it. It was impressive for the surrounding students, and everyone watched in amazement. Klaus wondered, a spring in the forest? It looked exactly like the landscape he had seen in the lands of the forest dwellers, and now he realized that this stone belonged to their land. This was deeper than the magic that gave shape. Had he ripped out the landscape carved into the stone itself? When he exclaimed, he shouted Alan's name, and he was stunned. Alan himself hadn't expected this from himself, and suddenly all the water appeared on him. He said that the book had done it by accident, and Klaus said that honestly, he never ceases to amaze. Alan asked, "Master, what was that?" Klaus replied that instead of the information about the shape contained in the stone, he had read the memories stored within the stone and transferred them to water magic. His eyes are capable of seeing ancient magic, and perhaps it is exceptionally powerful. However, as someone who only recently became a mage, he still lacks a little. He needs more practice. Alan thought it was frustrating, but the master was right. What did he need to know about ancient magic? What techniques did he need to master? He wouldn't reach that level in any field. Even this precious ice flower ornament, and all of this would only be because that wolf appeared and helped him back then. He'd studied information about this wolf after the incident. Mana gathers to activate magic in very rare cases. Apparently, there are phenomena where it manifests as living beings, known as ghosts. But was this wolf just one of those creatures called ghosts? He thought it had a will of its own, but he was sure he'd see it again someday. Klaus said there were only 2 years left for the forest dwellers ritual, and if he planned to challenge the Guardians to meet the Kings of the 7 Stars, he'd have to hone his skills in the remaining time, as if his life depended on it. 2 years was enough. He'd become much stronger, and then he'd defeat them. And he looked out the window hopefully. Klaus and Lucas observed his actions, and Alan agreed that he would then meet with the king. 2 years later, the employee confirmed the pendant's delivery and wished him well. Those 2 years flew by in the blink of an eye, and finally the time had come. His journey began. As he walked with Lucas, he asked if he was sure he was satisfied with such a small amount of luggage. Alan replied that it was enough, and everyone wished him to be careful. Lucas said that for 2 years he had worked hard, but now his journey began. Alan confirmed this, and with a smile on his face, walked toward his destiny. At that moment, they paused and heard someone comment on the girl's need to be careful. As a representative of the Magic Towers, she rightfully justified her title as heir to the Duchy of Orlando. Kyra replied that her origins had nothing to do with it. Alan realized it was another representative, and Kyra immediately looked at him and shouted that it was Alan. It was finally time to leave. How was he feeling? Alan passed by and said he was fine. He understood that she always tried to talk to him and recalled several moments from the past. Kyra asked if he really planned to go on this journey alone. In times like these, you never know when you might fall victim to a demon ambush. At that moment, she asked him to wait a minute. It wasn't too late, and she offered to come with her. She had a full complement of knights, so let him join them. She offered him her hand, but Alan passed by and said he appreciated the offer, but he no longer needed them. No one understood the impudence of this, and how he could reject Kyra's offer. He was letting this get to him, just because he'd reached a seemingly intermediate level in just 2 years. At that moment, Kyra said to know their place, beggars, because trash who couldn't even compare to Alan should keep their mouths shut. Thus she protected him. Alan wished good morning to his master and the receptionist. Caitlin said, "Here's the map she promised, as well as a directory of objects related to the tower. Please, let him feel free to use this time during his trip." Alan thanked her for this, and Caitlin reflected on how quickly he'd risen to the intermediate level, even faster than Lucas, who was hailed as an absolute genius. He truly was an exceptional child. But at that moment she paused and asked, "Alan, is he absolutely certain he can handle this?" The demon invasion was steadily growing, and it wasn't too late to order it from the royal knights. He replied that he would be fine, preferring to travel unencumbered at his own pace. At that moment, he turned and felt a pleasant breeze. Caitlin called after him, "I understand," and Klaus said he would wait for him here with news of his achievements. Alan turned and replied, "Yes, and now he's leaving. The plains of the 7 stars of the Elven lands. He can't wait to see what ghostly beasts await him." At that moment, Kyra informed her father that Alan had left the tower, and it appeared he would be making this journey alone after all. She'd continue to follow him into the Elven lands, and she replied that she understood. Preparations for this project were nearing completion. She asked the coachman to set out, and her father informed her that he would issue orders as needed and coordinate with his comrades. She replied that she understood, then said, "May the 8th Star King come with him." Ever since the escaped prisoner Malek began his attack on the capital, the demon invasion on the continent had become increasingly violent. Border defenses had been significantly strengthened as each country struggled to cope with the demon attacks and resolve the emerging problems, creating a tense atmosphere. The protagonist paid the rider and rode with him to the city. When he arrived, he said goodbye to the elf and entered the building. He thought about how tight the security measures were, and though he supposed this was to be expected, holding a festival in the midst of all these demonic attacks was serious business. A man approached him and asked if he was a festival participant. A human. His name was indeed on the list, and he could pass. When Alan entered, he saw a living forest, completely different from just a moment ago, but he could even smell the scent of blooming flowers. If he remembered correctly, the festival was being held on the territory of the White Tribe, and at that moment he took out his book and decided to use spells. He asked, "Is that really the wind arrow?" Wait, that attack lacked any genuine killing intent, and exclaimed, "For heaven's sake." At that moment he shouted, "The flowing arrow," but he again reflected it and asked to let him rest. The elf was thrown aside and laughed, saying that this was an excellent reaction and that he finally came to play shorty. Alan shouted, "What a wonderful greeting." Shumil approached him and said, "Welcome to the festival. Well, shall they begin?" Alan was dissatisfied with his actions, but Shumil hugged him and they walked on together. He explained that this place was intended for the participants to gather and that he should simply climb these stairs. "Does he see that tall tree over there? That's the altar where their king is worshipped." Alan gazed at this altar with surprise and admiration, for it looked simply incredible and magical. Shumil asked, "Isn't it beautiful? This altar is where the king is worshipped. The sacred tree, also known as the king's vessel, was the altar." Alan replied that everything was clear. That's why it was so shiny. The elf asked, "He sees it, right? For a human, this is quite a rare phenomenon. Among the forest dwellers, different tribes perform different roles. The White Tribe is tasked with protecting the sacred tree and the king of the 7 stars." Alan wondered if he remembered correctly, The white tribe was the central tribe responsible for the rituals. The master mentioned that they were something like a royal family, essentially the royal knights and the human kingdom. However, his memory was a bit fuzzy. He said they were grateful to him for gathering here despite the demon threat. This old man was the high priest. It was at times like these that they were supposed to undergo trials of blessing and pray for the continued protection and prosperity of their king. And now they must present their candidates. A magical butterfly would announce the beginning of the festival by the flame protecting their fertile lands. When the festival's beginning was announced, the girl opened a book and used her powers, blowing onto her palm and scattering flowering plants all around. Everyone was amazed by this beauty, and a multitude of petals appeared in the sky and fell directly to the ground. She combines plant magic with illusion magic. He didn't know it could be used like that. Shumil reported that she had always excelled at these magic-like spells, and that she was the most promising scribe among all the competitors. They reported that she could leave, and that among them, there were more hunters among the forest dwellers than magic users, and even more warriors who wielded weapons. Magic weapons are special weapons inlaid with mana stones capable of cloaking themselves in elemental power. Unlike magic, anyone with the appropriate abilities can use them, and with the recent increase in demon attacks, they have attracted attention as a countermeasure for those who are not scribes. Alan had heard that the number of magic weapon users was growing, but among the forest dwellers, there were indeed many people with the necessary abilities. Shumil harshly remarked that women should only be engaged in cultivating the fields, while magic scribes were intended only for rituals. She used her skills to put an end to such talk, and rose to the top. She worked hard in a country full of hunters. Alan wondered if she was a magical scribe, right? Without further ado, they were to begin the first trial tonight in the northern spring. Only those who successfully passed the selection would be admitted to the second stage and be able to fight the guards. So he would have to face him in the second trial, and he was looking forward to it. The priest said that for the past 200 years, no one had passed the second trial, and he hoped that after all this time, today would be the day one of them would have the opportunity to meet the king. Alan smiled when he heard this, and it turned out that Kyra and a stranger were watching him. She heard everything and turned around, hiding in the forest. As evening fell, Alan thought about the intense glow. Was it all because of those mana stones below? He looked at his reflection in the water, greatly surprised, when suddenly Shumil grabbed him by the collar and told him not to fall into the water before the trial began. It would mean immediate disqualification. He asked again, disqualification? Are the stones and springs connected to the test? He replied that, as expected from the shorty he had his eye on, he was on the right track, but there was another, even more interesting secret, and he was sure he would enjoy it. He began to whisper in his ear when the leader suddenly asked if everyone was there. The condition for successfully passing this test is choosing a stone from the springs that contains especially powerful ancient magic and gaining the king's recognition. They have 24 hours to do this, so he wished him success. Alan asked again, powerful ancient magic? He would have found it in a second. Shumil replied that anyone who saw it would think so. When Alan suddenly asked, what does that mean? He replied that if everything were so simple and a single glance was enough, does he really think they would make it a test? Alan asked, what does that mean? At that moment, Shumiel pushed him straight into the water and began falling, screaming. Shumiel told him to have fun there. Alan couldn't breathe and couldn't get out of there when he suddenly opened his eyes and realized he was looking at a huge forest, which surprised him greatly. Every piece, all of them, were mana stones. This one and this one, all of them were mana stones around him. He screamed with joy and surprise, saying that many of them glowed brightly, but as for whether the king would recognize them, that was unknown. He picked up mana stones but said that this was not it. There were time limits. He had to choose from such a huge number of options. He continued moving through this forest and didn't understand. Was this also a mana stone? God. Well, he thought he felt a familiar presence at that moment. A snake appeared around his hand, and he asked, is this a ghostly beast? The animal said that it must be that old whale's favorite. Alan was surprised. The old whale? The protagonist said that it was very cold here, and the snake apologized because this meeting with the king was necessary. It wouldn't protest even to the old whale's favorite child. This creature's role is to mix the spring stones, just like that. He might look closer for a meeting with the king, but this gets in the way, and he'll keep searching. I wonder what his heart will see? The creature became curious about what his heart would see. Let him look closer and try his best for the old whale. Alan exclaimed, damn it, it was too bright. Shumiel laughed and replied that he knew the better he saw, the harder it was to choose just one. Had he managed to meet the ghost beast? Alan replied that it told him he needed to do everything possible. Shumiel thought he'd truly begun to endear himself to the ghost beasts. Well, even with such a unique constitution, it would be a waste of talent if he didn't have the appropriate skills. The conditions for passing are choosing a mana stone inhabited by particularly strong ancient magic and gaining the king's recognition. What does it mean to be recognized by the king? Let him look over there. That's Lady Sheila. Has she found the stone yet? Alan exclaimed. Already? But it hadn't even been 2 hours. They held a sacred tree branch over the mana stone. Only those who present a stone recognized by the king can pass through the sacred tree. It was magnificent and undoubtedly pierced by the most powerful ancient magic. Everyone was commenting on how it glowed, exactly what one would expect from Lady Sheila. She smiled, and Shumiel said that meant she had passed on. He heard that she had eyes that see ancient magic even more clearly than priests, right? Considering that they see this glow only dimly, they don't stand a chance. Alan wondered if that meant they could see it well too, and that she really was able to choose just one in this blinding light, and that was incredible. But now was not the time to be impressed. He still had a chance. Shumiel bowed his head to the water and told him to hurry and find it, and he should also hurry and play with him. Alan replied that he thought I'd already told him not to take this lightly, to treat it like a game, because he would be the one who would ultimately suffer. With these words, he splashed water and dove deeper. After 20 hours, the light of ancient magic on this stone was very strong, and he didn't know if the king would recognize it. When he emerged, he wondered what the criteria were. Sheila approached him and said that, as expected of their shorty, he had chosen a lucky stone. He turned around, and when he saw the girl, she asked if she was distracting him. He realized that Sheila had been the first to pass the trials, and she had introduced herself to him, telling him that she was the leading sorceress, the scribe of the green flame. Alan replied that he was Alan from the magic tower in the human kingdom, correct? Sheila said that it seemed his search for the mana stone had been unsuccessful, and did he want her help? Alan chuckled. Help? Isn't it a violation to ask someone for help during a test? He wondered if this person, hadn't they said she was hardworking and achieved success through her incredible efforts? He couldn't imagine someone like that suggesting breaking the rules. But he didn't need help, and he'd said so. She didn't like people who didn't fight with their strength, did she? Sheila looked at him in surprise and said nothing.